started. I'm Kristen Leonard. Thank you for the opportunity for the partners, both for the work that you guys have done in the past that led us here and for the opportunity to talk about the project. Go ahead to the next slide there, Amanda. Just a real quick, if you want to know who these crazy people are, this is the team that we've got. I'm Kristen Leonard, the Executive Director of PALNI. Jill Morris is my partner in arms and all things. I'm the Executive Director of PALCI. And it is a true collaboration across our two consortiums. So you see our other team managers here, Amanda Herford, who's a PALNI staff member, who is the Scholarly Communications Director, is our project product manager. Carl Prano is the community liaison for the project, and he is the program officer for member services and resource sharing at PALCI. And Nick Stanton-Rourke is the project liaison, but he is also our PALNI Institutional Repository Coordinator and the archivist for Anderson University. So you see lots of cross-pollination. And of course, all of this is built on the foundation that Software Services by Scientist.com gives us in terms of the development and hosting support for the technology structure. So go ahead to the next slide there. Just a little bit of history real quick. We are in our second of two-year grants funded by IMLS. The project basis for this is an express need for a viable alternative to what the market was offering for a scalable, community-owned, multi-purpose repository solution with shared infrastructure while offering localized branding and configuration options. And I think I've mentioned for many of you that PALNI, our small schools, could not afford most of the commercial options that are out there. So working together in this way has made it accessible to us. So go ahead and go to the next one there. And just real quick, this vision, mission, and values document is something that Jill and I and Amanda and Carl and Nick came up with early on in the project in the first year or two, and we've refined it slightly, but for the most part, this has stood. And this serves, one, to clarify what the project is about back to our own supported organizations in this project. It articulates the scope of the project to our potential library users and sets appropriate expectations about what our priorities are. And it serves as a framework to make development and business practice decisions. One of the things that we heard for other consortia who were trying to provide repository services to their membership was that there was a lot of individual needs, and the institutions who needed a lot couldn't necessarily meet the needs of the small institutions. And so this idea of what is it we're trying to do and making sure that that was clear and upfront and continually reinforced was pretty important in order to make a sustainable, realistic project that you could do together. Again, it's to provide a low barrier entryway for libraries into the repository space, so low cost, easy to use, and flexible to meet multiple types of needs. It has the potential to be the institutional repository, the cultural artifact repository, controlled digital lending repository, which is a project that we're working on now, and the data repository at a basic level for some institutions. And of course, we embrace the open code, that the work that we're doing is benefiting others as well, and that we deeply appreciate the work that others have done to support us. Okay, go ahead and go to the next slide. And just to reinforce that, I have to say deep collaboration every 5 seconds or something happens to me, I think. But again, this is a collaborative process across multiple partners, and certainly leveraging what the Samvera community has brought to the table, and we're trying to take it even further. And then one of the things that's not mentioned here as well is that we've got 2 other consortia right now who are partnering with us, the Viva Virginia Consortium and Louisiana Consortium as well. But we continue to talk to additional consortia partners and hoping that we bring on a big chunk of people to help leverage this community. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jill.
All right, great. So now we're at the fun part. We've done a lot of work with our partners and certainly with SoftServe, and now we're at the part where we get to start offering this as a service to our institutions. And I think I'll start with the last bullet point, our last point on that slide, which our goal here is to optimize the right number of institutions in order to, again, achieve those goals and the vision that Kirsten so nicely laid out in terms of containing and reducing our costs overall and really maximizing the value of this repository to as many institutions as we can service in our consortia. So Kirsten and I have been going back and forth trying to model this out. And of course, there are a lot of places here where we're making our best guesses about how much this will cost to do in the long term. But keeping those goals in mind, we started to structure an offering that our institutions could take us up on. Kirsten and I, both of our groups have different kind of funding models and governance structures. And so as a result of that, we needed to figure out a way that we could equitably share those costs. So our initial offering out to our institutions and our consortia was to sign up for basically a 2-year term of service. We're initially saying that we're going to limit that to about 1 terabyte of storage with an option to add on for additional cost, additional storage opportunities. The range for our institutions, depending on pretty much on FTE, ranges from about $2,500 a year to $10,000 per year. And that is a little bit fluid. That's something we're going to continue to discuss once we have real sort of cost data back through the end of the first year. And we may need to make adjustments after that initial 2-year period to make sure that we can recoup all of our costs and just through a cost recovery exercise. So the major sort of cost centers for us are really about sort of hosting and AWS, of course. We've got a staging and test server that SoftServe provides for us, and a production level server. We also have sort of a maintenance and tech support contract in place to help us with that. And then in addition to that, we have other costs that we need to take into account, including new development that we want to do, some of which has been supported by some of our participating institutions, as well as external projects that want to partner with us, which is very exciting. We think this is a great space where we can offset some of those costs with grant dollars potentially. And then in addition, of course, there's staffing and support, the team the crazy team that Kirsten showed on that first slide. We need to make sure that we're able to recover those costs and provide transparency, I think, to our membership who's participating in this project around how much time we're spending on providing this service. And then, of course, we want to also be able to be active partners in the Samvera community, and we have built that in to our modeling as well. So we're doing this over a 2-year term. We've already announced it to our institutions, and we're trying now at this point to determine sort of how we're going to bring in that optimum number, and we'll see kind of where we start to test our limits potentially. But I think that's all I wanted to say there. So I think now I can pass it on over to Carl.
All right, thanks. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our Hyku Commons user community. So Hyku Commons is the product name for a collaborative instance of Hyku, and the image on the top right of the slide shows the landing page for the 18 publicly available tenants in our implementation. We also have over 30 additional repository tenants that are either private, in development, or used for testing. And as Kirsten mentioned earlier, these tenants they don't only represent libraries in Palsy and Powney, but also our other consortia partners that are listed on this slide. But these partners have helped us test the scalability. So engaging and facilitating community across our group of Hyku implementers is an important aspect of our shared service model. And our work with Hyku Commons user community is modeled on the work we've done with other user communities within our respective consortia, though our efforts here are expanded across multiple consortia to share human resources and expertise. And the user community is intended to facilitate an environment that accomplishes the items first listed on the slide: identifying gaps in Hyku, deduplicating work, encouraging sharing of solutions across institutions. And one of the main tools we use to drive this collaboration is the Hyku Commons Basecamp, which is the image on the bottom right of the slide. Hyku staff users at each library are added to the Basecamp project. Basecamp then provides an online hub for documentation, announcements, conversations, and general sharing. We also hold a monthly virtual Hyku user group meeting where we give development updates and provide a space for discussion and sharing. Next slide, please. By building this community around the Hyku Commons user group, we've been able to prioritize our Hyku development based on input. We've conducted 2 satisfaction surveys, one at the start of the grant cycle and then another just finished. We've also conducted 2 user experience studies, one to identify staff back-end workflow improvement areas, and another that focused on front-end and user testing. From these, we've compiled the areas that need improvement and then engaged the Hyku Commons user community through both surveys and in our user group meetings to prioritize which development items to work on first. So this collaborative approach of community prioritization has been a cornerstone of our service model to remove barriers for use as well as improve the overall product. And with that, I'll turn this over to Amanda.
Awesome, thanks, Carl. So I'm just going to make a few comments to give you some high-level updates of what we've done so far in our grant cycle. We've been working on this for almost 2 years now, and a lot has happened since we started with this IMLS grant. So again, taking account into what we've heard from our users, as Carl mentioned, we spent the last about 1.5 years working with SoftServe to implement some high priority development areas that address the big barriers to adoption that we're hearing from our users. So one of the first things that we wanted to address was bulk import and export. Our users really need to be able to upload their content and the corresponding metadata in big batches in order to support migration and scaled up deposit workflows. And they also need to be able to get their data out of Hyku for preservation and in case they want to migrate to a different system in the future. So we've added functionality and improved both those areas. We've also done some improvements to the front end of the interface. We've completely redesigned our homepage for Hyku Commons. We've also redesigned our Hyku for Consortia website and done a few tweaks to the front end of the repositories themselves, things like fixing display issues and labels and alignment. And we have another front end sprint planned where we're going to do a whole lot more improvements on the front end of our repositories. Also, a huge undertaking that brought a lot of improvements was an upgrade to Hyku 4.1. And this was a really big step that took a while working with SoftServe, but it brought a lot of really great features, such as the ability to feature collections, in-app analytics, and the ability to add a cross-tenant search, which we're excited to implement. And right now, we actually just recently finished our metadata focus sprint, and you can find out more about that if you go to the Hyku for Consortia news page. We did things like improve the OAI feed, make sure that the order of metadata entries stays in the intended order, and to allow for easier upload of metadata only records. And we've also done a lot of work just kind of identifying bugs and prioritizing requests for changes that have come from our users. So one other thing that I wanted to mention before I hand it off to Nick for the actual demo is another deliverable from our IMLS grant. So we have made something called the Collaborative Repository Toolkit. And the goal behind this toolkit is to provide a resource to help basically plan and implement shared repository services. And this could be for consortia, systems, or any other group really who's working on shared repository services to kind of learn from our model. So we have here the big areas that you want to think about and some of the big questions that you want to ask when embarking on this kind of a service. And we provide lots of examples and sort of inspiration from our project to help with folks who are wanting to get involved with this space. So I will put a link in the chat to that toolkit, and I will go ahead and hand it off to Nick for our demo.
All right, so I will go ahead and take over sharing my screen. All right, and so I'm going to do a very quick, very rapid, high-level overview of what Hyku looks like in our Hyku Commons instance with a focus on consortial administration, kind of setting this up for easy customizability, being able to hand off to your local administrator of each tenant, less of a focus on workflow, and also focusing on those areas where, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, when we were doing our initial gap assessments, the things that people identified as must-haves if they would be able to adopt this product for use at their institution. So you see here the Hyku Commons homepage, as Carl mentioned, these are the tenants that are publicly listed. If you are the super administrator of this consortial implementation of Hyku, then you have total and quick management over what displays on this homepage. If you're logged in, then you have your options for accounts and users up here where you can manage those. So you see I've clicked on accounts. These are a list of all of the accounts, including the ones that are not public. The act of creating a new account is super quick. In fact, it's just a matter of selecting a name for it. And you'll see we have this option to toggle search only. That's a recent feature that was brought in, which I will hit save on creating a new tenant called Samvera Board, that I will show you what a newly born tenant looks like. But also briefly, let's look at what search tenants look like and can do. So this, you'll see this front page is not particularly stylized. It's not really intended to be a tenant that you would send people to the homepage of, but this search bar is in fact, this is a shared search tenant for all of those publicly listed tenants on the front page. So when you search here, this is coming from every tenant. So you see I'm getting 4,000 results just on a simple search there. Click on something. And so this takes us to, now we are not in the shared search tenant. This took us to the landing page of the tenant that work is listed in. So this is Hanover College. You have your work there in the IIIF viewer, all of the relevant metadata from that. And so if you see what collection this is in and you click on that, it takes you out to that collection page in Hanover's tenant, right? From here, if you click home, you're going to the homepage of the Hanover tenant, but this is a way that you can set up shared search across all of your repositories. Now, at the moment, this is not publicly listed for Hyku Commons. We have a couple of enhancements that we want to do to this search interface, for instance, to make it clear at this level what tenant an individual work comes from before having to click in. So that's being added in current development work with our partner. But once we have those couple of improvements and we're happy with what this shared search looks like, this can become a search bar that sits on this Hyku Commons homepage, search all of the tenants or things like that. But go back into accounts, find our search tenant. And if we go into manage or edit this, we have the option, you can turn any tenant from public to not just by toggling this. So when we're ready for it to be public, if we want it to show up on that homepage, we just have to give it an directory image and then toggle this, and then it shows up on that homepage. But also down here, accounts to search, you can list or delist any of these at any time. So if we publish a new tenant, want to add it to the public shared account, just hit add, hold down, and then add it in there. And then if I save this, then that will also be included in the shared search. Things go in and out just as simply as that. But if we toggle into or navigate to board.hykucommons.org, because it is not listed, we have to bypass it, or we have that little pop-up that'll keep the public out. But so this is what a default tenant looks like when you first get it, right? And so some of our users are still using this default layout, right? Here's one with the default layout, but with their brand images in. But we've also created a number of other themes that institutions can use. So this is a neutral repository theme. If you go back to our shared search, not much here, but this is using the institutional repository focused theme, right? And then we also have cultural heritage theme here. So slight differences just in the layout, and all of that is configurable. So this is our brand new one. If we go to the dashboard, everything for setting up a new tenant, fully configurable from within this dashboard. We can go to settings, appearance. We have all of our basic options to set a logo for the tenant, the favicon that'll show up in the web browser tab, set your banner image, the directory image that shows up on the home page, default images for collections and works, but also you have this theme setting, right? So you can see this is the default theme, wireframe, cultural repository theme, institutional repository theme, and so on. For your home page, you can also determine whether you want the default search results to be a list view or a gallery view. And we have a few different formats for what a work display page looks like, depending on whether you want to focus more on some of the relationships, if you have works with child works or works where you want to highlight the collection relationship, or if you want more of the work itself to be centered. And then, of course, there's the default. All of that you just set up, save, and then you have that integrated into your homepage. And we also, under settings, if you go to features, many of the elements that make up one of these homepages, right? So look at this one, look at this. You have the featured researcher, a text box, collections. But if you look over here, you have recent uploads here, right? All of that is configurable. You can turn, if you don't want the share your work button, if you don't want featured collections, if you don't want featured works, recent works, any of that, you can kind of toggle on and off. So it makes it very easy to set up a new repository and very quickly sort of brand it for your distinct institution. So if you go into, I actually shouldn't need to log in because I logged in on a separate tab, so this should take me straight to my administrative dashboard. But you can see we have some analytics just appear naturally on the home page, right? So you have information about different resource types that we've assigned to works, recent activity. But if you go down to this analytics reporting, go to a works report, and we've only had this active since the upgrade to 4.1. So this is only showing data for the 2023 calendar year. But select one of these, look at this work. It's giving basic overview data. This will give me summary data about the work itself. And then if I want to, views, downloads, it has a view work button that'll take me to the work page itself, where there is also, because I'm logged in, I have this editing or administrative interface. This would simply be absent if I were a public viewer looking at this or not logged in, but there is this analytics button, and it takes you to specific analytics about page views and downloads for that work. And as I said, we're working on a few more enhancements for how analytics will be displayed in this dashboard section of the repository itself. As Amanda said, we have improved the OAI export so that it applies not just to your core Dublin core fields, which was previously the case, but to all fields and for all work types. And so here's an example of what the OAI report for just my university's repository looks like. So this is a list of all records, the export page for that. If you want to look at the records list format, all of that is there and should be fully integratable with any sort of OAI pickup system. So OAI is one way to export the works that you have in a system, but of course you can also export the metadata and the files itself through the same system as the importer. So when you're using the importer, you can create jobs here or export when you create a new export job, you have the option to do metadata only or get your files out as well. When you are exporting files, you have the option to get it in a CSV with a zipped attachment of all of the files, or to do export through Baggett for file verification. When you export, you can choose to export from a specific import job, which makes round tripping a fairly simple process, a specific collection that you've set up, everything of a specific work type, or you can export your entire repository at once. If you do that, it'll break it into multiple smaller zip files for easier downloading. Finally, a recent sort of correction that we made for a long time. You can see some of my private works there showing recent incorporation of Markdown and rich text incorporation for certain fields. We also have recently added a administrative metadata field if you want to make internal notes that are not for the public. So I can see this because I'm logged in. If I log out, then that is not visible. Anyone who has edit permission for that work has the ability to see that. But then also you can batch edit some elements of all of these works, which is really convenient for instance, if I want to take all of those and just all at once change them from public to private visibility, or share specific works with an individual user or an individual group of users, that is all configurable in bulk or in batch through the dashboard here. There are other things we could show off. We did a lot of work with how to bring in users, how to associate users with groups, and then assign roles directly to those groups so that they can then, users can move in and out of different permission sets without having to remove users from the system. Embargoes and leases now activate automatically the way you would expect. So if you set something to go from public visibility to only institutional visibility after a set date, when that set date comes, the system will automatically change that without anyone needing to go in and manually manage it. And as Amanda mentioned, we are currently doing a development sprint around improving workflows. And so this dashboard for reviewing submissions, things that have been deposited and you need to approve that, that is going to be improved in that batch. But with that, I will turn it over to whoever is taking over.
Taking it home. You want to put really, we're at the questions phase here. If you guys had anything that you wanted to ask of us, we'd be happy to entertain any of those. Now or later. And I should say too, we do have a test tenant. So if anybody's interested just to kick under the hood there, we'd be happy to talk to you about it. All right. Well, thank you, team. It doesn't look like there's any questions just yet, but yeah, lots of information. Obviously, we're pushing out this information to the other consortia's folks as well. So, and we've had some conversations about this too. Well, we call it Hyku for Consortia. Clearly, any group of libraries wanting to run this together, that's what it's structured around. So even a large library that has a bunch of different types of libraries who have different brandings or different workflows could leverage this approach as well. So, all right. Thank you, everyone.